Clear. Hi guys, so after sort of reviewing Brick in my latest mini reviews, it got me thinking about possibly revisiting the Cube series. I've always really liked those movies, but then I realised that there's actually still one Cube film that I've not seen at all, i.e. the Japanese remake from 2021. I vaguely remember it coming out. I saw a review of it which was kind of neutral, and then the following day, I forgot all about it, and here we are 4 years later. If you don't know what Cube is about, so the first one, it's about this group of people who wake up in a cubed room, and there's a little door on all six sides of the room, but if they go through one of those doors, it just leads to another cubed room, and whichever door they pick from that room just leads to another cubed room, and so on. And it turns out that they're just trapped in this interconnected bunch of cubed rooms within a cube, if you see what I mean. So they've got to try and get out of this place before they starve to death. But what makes their task harder is that a lot of the rooms, but not all of them, are booby trapped, and these traps are absolutely vicious. They will kill you if you stumble into one. Fascinating film, and all the way through watching it, you're bound to just sit there wondering who on earth built this thing and why would you put people into it. Eventually there was a sequel called Cube 2 Hypercube, which was set a little bit into the future, and it featured more sophisticated traps that bent the rules of time and space. Very fun film. I do like that second one. The third film was a prequel that kind of showed you behind the curtain of the cube. It focused more on the people who were monitoring it and running it. A little bit unnecessary, in my opinion. The quality takes a dip with that third one. And here we are at the fourth. I decided on a little bit of a try before you buy experiment the other night before committing to this. Or should I say try before you watch, because Cube 2021 currently free on Amazon Prime if you have a subscription. But what I decided to do was just watch the opening kill one night before bed to see if it whetted my appetite. There's a very famous kill in the original Cube where this one guy who wakes up in the place, he basically gets dissected by a giant grill that swings down, and it's so good. It's like one of the best kills I have ever seen in horror. So I was interested to see what the remake would do with that. Just replicate that, just repeat it, or do something different. Because I didn't know at this point whether this was going to be like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre type remake where we get a significantly different film from the first one, in which case, great, I'm up for that. Or maybe a Psycho type remake, which is shot for shot. And if that's the case, then why bother at all, right? But the opening kill in the remake, whilst not being as good as watching Julian Richings getting dissected, it was still a lot of fun. And once the trap was sprung and I saw what they'd done, I was grinning from ear to ear. I thought it was a terrific kill. And I went to bed thinking, yes, I'm absolutely going to watch the full film of Cube 2021 the following night. So this was directed by Yasuhiko Shimizu. You might remember him from such films as Pension Love is Pink and Until the Curry Rice is Ready That Day. Now, I'll hold my hand up and say I've seen neither of these films, although I have been thinking about getting a curry this weekend. Curry. Alas, the rest of the film is not really different enough for this to be a great Cube film in its own right. It's mostly a remix of the elements that went into that 97 film. I mean, this is still worth watching, I'd say, because the events do play out differently than how they did first time around. But I still don't think the remake does enough to stand on its own 2 feet. The DNA of the whole thing is still very much Cube 1 from 1997. Plus, watching these newer characters work out what the numbers mean all over again was kind of mind-numbingly dull. I found that really clever first time around. But watching all those same discussions and thought processes happening a second time just for the same results, it was kind of like, oh, yeah. Also, the cube itself doesn't look as good this time around. So in the original, there were all these cool-looking patterns on the walls, and it made you wonder if maybe the overall structure was possibly alien. But this time around, even though we still get different coloured rooms, which is something, I suppose, The patterns on the walls are gone, so the walls just look kind of blank now. It's definitely a downgrade. One thing I will say is that there are more traps in the remake. So in the first film, I don't think they had that much money, hence why there weren't that many traps. But what traps they did have looked really fantastic. They were really good special effects, very well executed. This time around, more traps, but they don't look as good somehow, as if they were going for really cheap effects. For the most part, they're passable, I suppose. But there are a couple of traps here that do look kind of bad. There's this one room where these spinny blades are coming down slowly, and the characters realise that they're going to have to go out the door in the floor. But every time the camera pans up and looks at these spinny blades, I was just very unconvinced by the CGI. And actually, the blades don't even look as if they're in the same room as the characters somehow. There is an interesting change up to the rules of the game. So in the first film, when the characters went into a safe room, they could just stay there as long as they wanted. They could chill out, have a chat, beat each other up maybe, or they could have a long sleep, whatever. But this time around, if they enter a safe room, they're only safe there for a short period of time before a trap will spring. It's not a trap that will just kill somebody outright, because that would be really unfair for that to happen in a safe room. But it might be the sort of trap like the spinny blades thing where, oh, we've got a few seconds, we're going to have to get out of here now, it's no longer safe. So I guess this is the newer film's way of just kicking the characters up the arse, just getting them to keep moving so that there can be momentum to the story, I suppose. But my first instinct was that this was actually an improvement, that they would do this. But then the more I thought about it, it's not like the characters in the first film hung around in rooms for too long, because they knew that they were going to starve to death if they didn't get moving and solve this thing. So I'm not massively convinced that this change was needed, really. I'm kind of like 50-50 on it now. The characters this time are certainly not as good. So in the first film, every single character in that queue, barring the guy who dies in the first 5 minutes, very clearly defined. They were all interesting people, even though we didn't necessarily get all of the backstories. But this time around, I really struggle to even remember most of the characters, and I only saw the movie 2 nights ago. This film is actually longer than the first one. I think it's about 10 minutes longer, maybe. So really, the characterization should be better with the remake. There's no excuses, and yet it just isn't. At times, we get flashbacks and we see some of the characters in their own homes. But I think this was a mistake. You didn't get this in the first film. There was no respite from the cube. We were always there in this monstrosity. We never left it. But with this remake, by having flashbacks, it gives the viewer a little bit of a break from the action, a break from the terror, and I think that's a mistake, personally. I don't think you should take the camera out of the cube during these films. You've got to stay in the moment. That's how I feel anyway. There was a villain first time around, a really great character. He was a scary son of a bitch, and yet, even though there's also a villain in the remake, he or she doesn't really make themselves known until right at the end. It's really kind of half-arsed what they do with that. And in terms of female characters, this remake is an absolute disaster. So in the first film, there were two women, and they were both great characters. The pair of them, outstanding. In the remake, there's just one female character, and she hardly does anything. She's hardly got any lines. I mean, she's in like most of the movie, but she's always like stood in the background, and in the foreground we've got all the men sorting things out and deciding where they're going to go next, and the one woman is just going to stay out of the way, and it's like, why in 2025 do we have a film like this? Why are you making this decision to just make this film so male-centric? There are a lot of cool moments from the first movie which are either missing entirely second time around, or they're just not done as good. So there's no villain getting squished by the moving cubes. That was such a glorious moment first time around. There's no woman dangling on like a clothesline outside of the cube. That was a fantastic part of the first film. There is an attempt at doing the sound activated room, which was such a tense part of the original, but it just seems really rushed this time. Like first time around, when the characters are crossing that room in silence, it goes on for quite some time. And I was sat there in the living room like this. I was desperate not to make a sound in my own living room just in case that would activate the trap in the movie. That's how into it I was. But this time, everybody just seems to have crossed the room in 2 seconds flat, and then we're at that bit at the end where somebody makes a noise late on and the trap gets activated, but it's all right because we're already out of the room. But the whole scene is just over in a flash. There's none of that tense creeping across the room sort of thing that you got first time around. So overall, most of this film is just not as good as the first one. There's one or two interesting additions this time around, but it's definitely the lesser product. And I don't understand why this had to be a remake. If you're going to do another Cube film, why not just come up with your own ideas? That there's plenty of stuff they could still do even today with this series. I came up with a bunch of ideas for Cube sequels once in about 5 minutes flat, so I'm sure professional writers could do likewise. In fact, I'll give you some of my ideas. So I thought, why not do a film where the walls of the cubed rooms are like windows, so you can see into all the other rooms and you can see where potential traps are and stuff like that. I don't know if that would be difficult to do from a special effects standpoint, being able to see so many rooms in one camera shot. Maybe it would be tricky, I don't know, but it's something they could do. And then I thought, why not make the rooms triangle shaped? Why does it always have to be a cube? And imagine the title for such a film: Cube, Triangle. They could experiment, you know, they could do a film where the cubed rooms are like giant cubed rooms, and that might make the traps feel different. It would just give everything a different perspective, I suppose. Why does it always have to be the same sized cubed room? In other words, there's surely tons of things you could do and yet still maintain that distinct cube feel. So why, on just the fourth movie, would you just go back and do the first film again, albeit it's in a different country? Why? Right, we've reached that point where we go to the bag of terror, so I can show you what score I'm going to give the Cube remake from 2021. Here's the bag. So we've got 1, 2.5 Michael Myers carving knives out of 5. Now, just after I'd watched this, I had decided to give it 3. But talking about the movie, doing the review, has kind of pissed me off in a way that I didn't even feel when I was watching the movie. So I'm going with 2.5. This is an average kind of film, really. You might as well watch it if you like the other Cube movies, but ultimately it's very forgettable. I can't see myself watching it again. I would like to get the trilogy box set of the first 3, because I know that is a thing that you can buy, but I can't see myself ever adding the 4th film to my shelf. I just don't want to. So there we are. As a fan of these films overall, it is my hope that they will eventually make a brand new, fresh Cube film. I just hope that it's not a remake of Cube 2 Hypercube. Please, give us an original.